Hello and welcome to the webinar for this morning. This is with Cloud Design Box and also Mark Guest, who's the Director of Innovation for PolyMat. Hi Mark, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Darren. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So just a word about who's presenting today. It'll be myself. I'm Darren Hemming, Operations Manager. You'll be hearing from Tony Phillips, the Director, Lloyd, who's one of our consultants, and yourself, Mark, as well.
Thanks, Darren. So what I'll do just to begin with, I'll just go through the agenda that we've got for today's session. So we're going to start off just telling you a bit about Cloud Design Box and what we do. We'll go through a quick demo of the sort of setup that we've done at PolyMat to help save them teach time. And then we're going to bring on Mark from PolyMat, who's going to take you through some of the things that they've done themselves to extend SharePoint and Teams at the trust level, again to save teach time and to automate some of the processes that they have inside the schools. And then at the end, we'll open it up to questions and answers. There is a question and answer section on the live event. It should be a little speech bubble. If you click on that, you can ask us questions at any point throughout the presentation, and we'll try our best to answer them either through the session or we'll come back to them at the end. So just a bit about ourselves. We're Cloud Design Box. We're a group of education teams and SharePoint experts, and we work with over 260 schools in the UK and abroad. And just to go through some of the benefits of the platform that we provide, we try our best to create a central system where teachers can save time by having centralized resources that they can reuse with all of the classes that they teach. Also to save department leader time so they can keep track of the quality of those resources by having a central location for them, and to check that teachers are setting work through the analytics. And I guess the other side of this is also improving the communication in the school. So not just through Teams and through chat, but also through a SharePoint intranet, where you can publish resources to large groups of people across the entire school or across the entire trust. And we try and make it as easy to use as possible. In terms of user adoption, one thing that we try and specialize in as well is making sure that the school has a long-term user adoption strategy, building confidence with the school, so making sure that they have the training in place. We've got CPD courses, we've got Microsoft Innovative Educator badges that teachers can earn through those online training sessions, and we've also got a self-service training portal so teachers can catch up and have a go at those sessions themselves. And obviously there's all the other benefits of moving to the cloud, so automation that we do from the school MIS to create all of the classes and teams, also all the costs that you save by moving to the cloud and becoming serverless. So I'm going to take you through a quick demo of what Cloud Design Box do, and then we'll move on to Mark's demonstration. So what we do is we can create a SharePoint intranet, which is embedded inside Microsoft Teams. And this is a place where you can publish resources to the entire school or the entire trust. So it might be news from around the school. We've got web parts on here like Word of the Day. We've got news from the trust, training videos. But essentially, this is an area that you can personalize for each individual school within your mat. And there's also a mega menu to give you easy access to all of the SharePoint sites and all of the teams that you have access to. So it's personalized for you. And some of those are communication portals where you can publish resources to the entire school, such as a site for the library, where you might have information about the library services in the school. Or it could be communication areas. So these might be collaboration areas. And these might be areas where small groups of people work together as a team, such as your data team, your SLT team. And again, you can only see the sites that you have access to. And what we do from a curriculum perspective is we pull in all of the class data from your MIS. So we work with all the UK MISs and additionally other ones as well. And we can pull in all of the class data, create all of your class teams automatically, synchronize them automatically, but also create some centralized resource areas from that data. So if you're a teacher and you teach, 4 Year 11 English classes, the idea is that instead of uploading your resources 4 times every single academic year, that you create them, you create most of your resources in your centralized resource area for English, and then you can reuse them with all of the classes with all of the English classes across the entire school. So ones that you teach, but also ones that your colleagues teach as well. So the idea is to have that one version of the truth. So you have that centralized resource area. Again, these are all security trimmed for the different year groups within the school, and you can publish your resources here, and those will then appear in all of your class teams as well. So if I jump into Teams and I jump into one of my Year 11 English classes, you'll see that there is an extra tab across the top for all of those centralized resources, and these resources will be added to every single English class every single academic year, and we can just reuse any of those resources that we've got stored centrally, and we can even use them inside our assignments when we set the assignments as well. So those are some of the things that we set up for schools. We also create student work folders in every single class team. So that's a place where you can drop off work for those students can drop off work for the teacher. The teacher can see all of the folders, the student can only see their own. And that's an area where you can publish those resources. And when it comes to a multi-school setup, if you've got a trust of schools, then we can set up different types of sites for things like your primary schools that you might have within the trust. And again, they can have their own sites, their own permission and security barriers to that data, but also a trust level site. And this is something that Mark will be showing in his demonstration about maybe some of those services that you can publish centrally that can actually be consumed by all of the schools in your trust, whether it's news and information, whether it's policy documents, or it might be any sort of central services or central teams that span across the different schools. And again, you can make those available with inside SharePoint. You can publish it, so it's available inside everybody's Microsoft Teams setup, but also as a SharePoint website as well. So we're now going to move on to our demonstration with Mark. Mark, you're the Director of Innovation at PolyMat. What does that job role involve?
Well, really, it is a job that has got so many different facets to it. I mean, it kind of started off with me focusing on data and systems and technology and looking at how we can make the best of those things across the trust, how we can make it efficient, how we can make sure we're getting value for money, and, making it so that it actually helps and supports all staff across the trust. But it's kind of morphed a bit since then, and it does kind of go off into other areas. So teaching and learning, bits to do with sort of pedagogy and CPD. Really, I would say I've got my finger in a lot of pies across the trust as part of this role.
So I guess it's a lot about driving that change in the schools, and I guess working in a mat, that's, I guess, getting everybody on the same page as well.
Yeah, I mean, as an example, one of the things we've been thinking about recently, really because of COVID-19 and the lockdown, was, we've changed so many things, both technology and non-technology based, across the trust over the last year. Which of those things are we going to keep and which ones are we not going to keep when life returns somewhat to normal? So that's included us thinking about things like virtual parents' evenings, but also, more practical things like, do we keep students, zoned within break times and lunch times so that they're mixing with their own year group? Those kind of things. What were the benefits that we've gained from that, and what are the areas that we feel we want to go back to? So it's quite wide ranging.
Great. I guess during the pandemic, everybody saw that big shift to adopting these systems quite quickly. what was your experience within the trust in terms of, going from one day maybe not using a huge amount of online systems to the next day, sort of everything has to be online?
Yeah, I mean, it surprised me a lot, actually, because, as you say, we had to move incredibly quickly. So, literally, like, let's say the Thursday, no one was using Teams beyond a few departments. We would have had the IT team and, maybe a few teachers in business studies and science, that kind of thing, who were using Teams on a regular basis, to saying, okay, well, actually, and our remote learning plan is that all subjects are going to use this. And so overnight, everyone had to be trained on and start using the assignments feature in Teams, first of all. And that's kind of how we did it. Was we spent probably 2 or 3 weeks just doing assignments. We didn't worry about live lessons and that kind of stuff. We just focused on assignments. Let's just get work out to students who are going to be at home. And then once staff were more comfortable with that, and we built that confidence, then we introduced the live lessons, and we gave staff options around, they could do recorded lessons if they wished, or they could do them fully live, and we did, again, lots of training around that. And that, again, I think we moved very, very quickly. But I was pleasantly surprised that staff across the trust really embraced it, and I think it was a kind of needs-must situation. Everyone really embraced it, and I know from talking to other schools, who perhaps didn't do the live lessons, didn't go down that route, that it was really beneficial for our students to have that contact with their teachers, and I would guess that they have not got as many gaps in their learning as a result of that, the way we did it.
Great. And I guess, you used SharePoint and Teams to provide that through the lockdown. Why did you choose that platform? Was there a particular reason you went with Teams and not with Zoom or Google, or was it just that you had stuff in place?
Yeah, partly because we had stuff in place already. I mean, my background is as a teacher, and so I was teaching computer science and had been using Teams since before it was Teams, since it was Microsoft Classroom and so on. So I already had a strong background in using it, as did several of our departments. We're very much a Microsoft facing school. We use Office 365, we use all of that infrastructure. So Google really wasn't an option for us, because there would have just been too much change required to go down that route. So that discounted them. In terms of Zoom, I mean, Zoom was mentioned as a possibility, but I think at the time there was some GDPR things and safeguarding risks that were being talked about in the press, that we just decided at the time, okay, we're going to avoid that, and yes, we went down the Teams route as a result.
Great. And when you sort of extended SharePoint and Teams with some of the stuff that you're going to show us today, how did you go about developing those skills in-house?
Yes, so I mean, being a computer science teacher, obviously, you learn to fiddle and develop your own skills as you're doing that. So part of it came from me just having a go at things, trying to solve the problems that we'd got, and that's the first stage of it really was just that fiddling. And then there would be points where I would get to and I wouldn't know quite what to do, and I would do some searching on Google and try and find ways in which I could solve that problem. But it became clear eventually that we needed a little bit more than that. So just towards the end of my presentation, actually, I've got a little list of some of the things that we've done. But things like the app in a day training, which is a free piece of training you can get. I mean, it's not focused towards schools, it's more focused towards business, but it's still a worthwhile course, I think, to get someone on. And there's a similar one for Power BI and dashboards in a day, which are useful. There's Microsoft Learn and the Microsoft Education, or the MEC, all of those places where you can get information from and help upskill yourself. I mean, as I was saying to you, Tony, a little while ago off this call, one of the issues is to do with sustainability. So, if I was hit by a bus, at the moment, the skill set resides with me. So one of the things that we've got to do as a trust, and I've got to do, is to really get other people in the trust to develop these skills as well. So we're currently trying to get one of our data managers through the Power Platform Fundamentals course, so that he's upskilled, and we'll do more of that. We'll develop staff in the trust to be able to do these things, and so it's not just me tinkering. It is actually part of our strategy.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of these skills, such as Power BI, that sort of belongs to that data role, doesn't it, within the school? And maybe some of the Power Automate stuff, maybe that relates to some of the business side of the roles in the school as well. So I'm guessing you can hopefully distribute those skills over time. So shall we get into it? Do you want to share your screen and take us through some of those things that you've set up?
Yep, no problem. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen now.
Great, that's working for us.
Great. Okay, so just sort of following on, first of all, from what Tony was saying, we've actually been using SharePoint for a long time. We were using an on-site SharePoint 2003, I think it is, for a good 7 or 8 years, and therefore we already have this pre-existing knowledge of SharePoint, not just in terms of development, but staff are used to using it. It is the main communication hub within the boys' school in the trust, at least. It is very much the way in which it's where people go for information. So we already had that, but we've been working with Cloud Design Box for just over a year, I think now. What Tony was showing before was essentially the way in which Cloud Design Box will set up the intranet for you. So this is what ours looks like. This is the mat level to start with. So you can see the mega menu is there that Tony was talking about. We've got various collaboration sites that you can see. These are all our shared services within the trust. So each school can access those shared services. I mean, we haven't completely launched all of this yet, so we're probably a few weeks away. We've got some training happening on Friday this week with all staff at the boys' school, and we had training at the girls' school last week. So we're almost at launch point. But you can see what we've tried to do is make sure that when we launch, everything is ready to go. So we've got the site news. It's sort of aggregating news from all across all the SharePoint sites. So you can see that all of those ones there are from the trust, but it would also pull through any relevant news from any of the other sites within the trust as well. We've got the buttons over here, the quick links. There's some various things there, like Tony mentioned, policies. So all our MAT central policies will be stored there. We have links to some of the help desks in terms of the shared services that I mentioned. There's also this thing down the bottom, Poly Voice, which is like I'm not sure whether we're going to stick with the name Poly Voice or not. At one point we called it Tell Tim. Tim's the name of our CEO. And we then decided that sounded a bit too informal. But the idea is that staff can ask questions, share feedback directly to the trust leadership team. We've got the calendar in there. We've got an area for vacancies across the trust and so on. So that's kind of what the map page looks like. This is the boys' school staff page, and you can see that first of all the layout, the format is mostly the same. We've tried to keep it consistent across all of the trust sites. So the news, again, you can see you've got the PolyMat news is showing at the moment at the top there, but it would pull through from any of the sites. We decided to keep this kind of quick announcements area, which is quite old-fashioned, and I know we had a lot of discussion with Darren about whether we should continue with this or not, because it is a SharePoint 2003 sort of module that we were using, but that gets used for very specific announcements, whereas obviously creating a news item just takes a little bit longer. So it's quick announcements, quick staff announcements go in there, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. Just scrolling down that page, we've then got a bigger list of quick links. We've got our school calendar, all the help desks and so on. The cover manager pulls in the files that are generated from Sims in terms of cover for that day and room changes and so on. So those all go in there. But yeah, that's the boys one, and the girls one effectively is the same. So we've got the same layout on both sites. That's the bottom of that page. So some of the things that are in there, one is an integrated calendar, which we've developed using Power Automate. So if I just go back, you'll see that each of the sites has the calendar icon. So effectively, we've got a girls' school calendar, a boys' school calendar, and a MAT calendar. And what we wanted to do was to integrate those. So we've basically got these 6 flows in Power Automate, and you can kind of, from the name, get an idea of what they do. But basically, any changes that are made on the boys' calendar will then go over to the MAT calendar, and so on and so forth, so that they're integrated, so that we don't have 3 calendars that quickly go out of sync. The calendars will contain the same information, and you can kind of see an idea of how it's working on the right hand side there. Again, this is one of those things where I just had to do some Googling and try and work out how to do it. So the filter query bit there, I wouldn't have known how to do that 3 or 4 weeks ago. So we're developing our skill set all the time. So this is kind of how it works. You're putting a new item into your calendar, and there's a button here that says publish to MAT calendar. So this would be on like the boys' school or the girls' school calendar. They decide whether it's also going to go onto the MAT calendar or not, and if it does, then it also gets propagated into those other calendars. And there's a similar thing at MAT level, where you say, do you want to publish it to the boys' school calendar or the girls' school calendar? The announcements I said I'd come back to as well. So we've used some Power Automate on that. So this is the sort of form that you fill in when you're adding a new quick announcement. And one of the things we've added in is this target audience. So if you say it's all staff, then it will also send an email to all those colleagues who are in the all staff email group. And that's an example at the bottom there of the email that gets sent. This was really something that came up from our staff wellbeing committee, who was saying, what happens anyway is that people post something on the intranet, and then they send an email saying I've posted something on the intranet. So rather than doing that, let's have them post it to the intranet, and that's their job done. And then it also will generate an alert by email to tell people to go and see it. One of the options in target audience is no alert required. So if it's not, if it's someone's lost their keys, then you don't need to send an alert and take up people's inbox. But that's the idea behind that aspect.
Mark, can I see that? Is that something that you also post to the All Staff team, as well as email it out?
Not at the moment, I don't think. I know you are right. Yeah, you are right. On the right hand side, yeah, you can see using the Flowbot in Teams and also the push notifications in Power Apps as well.
Great. So that can just push straight out to them. They don't even need to go into the emails. They can just get that alert straight away. So
Yeah,
that's really nice.
I mean, you know, in terms of not all staff will want to have school-based stuff on their phones, but we do have a number of people who do, SLT in particular, at each school. So one of the apps that you'll see shortly is like an SLT alert app, whereby, you know, if there's a reason why a student needs to be removed from a lesson or SLT support is required, then they can go onto that app and it will send push notifications to SLT on their phone. So that's the kind of, you know, culture that we're starting to develop, is that we've got more people who have these apps on their phone, and therefore it's a good way of communicating with them. So here are some of the apps. So this one is just like an office request app. So if you want to send letters or communications out to parents, then there's a little form that you fill in. You know, what's the task that you want the office to do? What's the priority level? When's it due by? Attachment if you want. As you can see, there's a version for the boys' school and the girls' school. The office, the sort of clerical bit, is not part of our shared services, so each school has their own office staff. And for this one, we've just used the rules inside SharePoint because it's quite a simple app in this instance. So when any item is created, it will send an email to, in this case, those are members of staff working in the girls' school office. And when the task status is changed, either to closed or working, it basically sends an update email to the person who requested that task. So that's the first one. Here are some of the others. So we've got like a help desk for the data team. So this allows people to view any tasks that they've asked of the data team, that view my requests or view my set changes. They can see any requests that they've put in and what the status of that is. Or if they want to create a new request, they click that button. We've also got this one set up so there's an email address, which is actually getting more use at the moment. So they can send an email to the data team, and Power Automate you know, knows that an email has been sent to that address and just adds it onto the help desk. So that's that one. The sanctions one I mentioned before. We've got performance management for associate staff running through this. So the line manager will meet with a member of staff and fill out a form together, reviewing the year, setting targets, and so on. And then the call outs one that I mentioned is there as well. We have embedded some of these into the SharePoint pages. So this is the data team page on the girls' school site, and you can see that the app is actually embedded within the SharePoint page. So you know, they can just find it from there. Obviously, some of them will be using it via their phones, as I mentioned. Some of them might be going to it via just the Office 365 portal, but we want to do more of, you know, making it easy for people to find these things and to use these things through SharePoint.
So Mark, on this SharePoint site, what do you use this page for? Is this for information about the data team?
Yeah, so further down, obviously I'm not showing this bit in this screenshot, but further down is various document libraries which contain the relevant data for the school. So it's got things like spreadsheets with student progress. It's got sort of, you know, the old Raise Online style reports, you know, any of that kind of external data. So it's got lots of stuff that people would use from the data team, that are produced by the data team. And yeah, so it's kind of a hub where any member of staff would go for anything related to data or pupil progress.
Great, so it's all organized for them, everything's in one place.
Yes, and there's one of those on each site, because obviously you wouldn't have that at MAT level, because boys' school staff don't need to see the girls' school data and so on. So we've got one of those pages for each of the schools. Now, prior to Power Apps, we were using some Microsoft Forms for this, but we are planning to update these. So this is a leave of absence request stuff that we did. So way before I learned how to use Power Apps, that was what we were using. We were using a Microsoft form, and they just basically fill in the form to put in a leave of absence request. We also have the same thing for annual holiday requests for support staff, yeah, I mean it's worked okay. The issue obviously with doing forms instead of SharePoint is things like this. So they have to type their name in, and it doesn't verify that they've typed it correctly. It doesn't have a people picker. So we have had situations where, particularly when it gets to the line manager question towards the bottom of the form, where they've typed in the name incorrectly, and then that means that the Power Automate fails because it can't work out who that person is. It can't send an email or an approval request to them. So the plan is to move away from forms, update this as a SharePoint list, so that it works just the same way as the other apps that I've been talking about.
That sounds like a good plan, because then you have the people picker and you can look at the line manager from AD, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the only sort of downside of it is the kind of branching that's involved. And as far as I know, isn't possible with the SharePoint list. So at the moment, you can see it only shows me 3 questions in there at the moment. But if I say yes, it's an entire working day, then I get the next question. If I'd said no, it's not an entire working day, then I get a different question. So that kind of thing probably isn't possible in a SharePoint list or a Power App in quite the same way. But I think it will be better in terms of checking the verifying the people, particularly the line manager, that it needs to be sent off to.
Yeah, I guess you could use a SharePoint list and then Power App to add some logic in, but then it becomes quite complicated to set up. Whereas I guess you could just ignore the questions that aren't appropriate to you.
Yes.
But it's just obviously not as clean as this.
Yeah, but it's one of those things. There's pros and cons on either side, and as I say, I think probably SharePoint is going to be the safer option in terms of making sure it works properly.
Yeah.
And this is kind of some of the behind the scenes stuff on that. So you can see that when the new response is submitted in forms, eventually it goes to line manager approval, so it goes off to their head of department or whoever. And eventually then it goes down to cover manager approval as well. And there's sort of email rejections and approvals and so on all embedded in. Just down the bottom there, you can see the approvals app in Teams, which is something that we have started using a lot more. So certainly line managers are using that a lot more, so they can actually see the list of things they've approved in the past and any that are pending. So we're getting better at using that as well. Power BI, unfortunately, I can't show you a great deal of, because obviously the majority of it will contain identifying information. So but we have loads of Power BI dashboards that we've developed for the trust, both at school level and at trust level. This just shows you an example of how we've embedded one of those dashboards into a SharePoint page. This is what we call our tutor report. and effectively it is designed for tutors across the school, the girls' school in this case, to view those areas that you can see listed. So the attendance of all the students in their tutor group, punctuality, and so on. And you know, we sort of took, I mean, if I move on slightly, you can see here that we've used the SIMS stuff that they published for schools to get started with Power BI. So this is the sort of the bat file, as they call it, which runs overnight and spits out a load of reports, which are these ones over here. So it basically just drags all that information out of SIMS and puts it into a certain place. And then we use the Power BI gateway to then refresh the dashboards. So one of the dashboards here is our self-isolation dashboard. So that will look at, you know, what students are going to be off today due to COVID, and are therefore, you know, needing, you know, work to be provided whilst they're at home. So that's one of the dashboards that we use, and there's many dashboards that are, as I say, are being used widely across the trust. I mean, just going back on that, so I'd say the most used at the moment is head of year level. Heads of year are really you know, using the Power BI dashboards very well. You know, they will use it for all sorts of things. One of the things we've just introduced was a problem that I was asked about. How can I, as a head of year, how do I know who are the teachers who teach this particular student? How do I get that information and be able to send them an email really quickly? So one of the things we added into the pupil profile on that dashboard was a list of the teachers' email addresses, effectively. So the head of years have come back and said, you know, it's taken a 10-15 minute job, what they used to do manually from SIMS, and reduced it down to 3 or 4 minutes to go into Power BI to extract the list of email addresses from that particular student for whom they want to email the teachers, and then just to copy and paste those email addresses into Outlook and hit send. So, you know, we're constantly developing these based upon feedback that we get from the actual users. Some of the things that Tony showed earlier in Teams are things that we want to explore a bit more, actually. So I'm sure actually after this, Tony, I've got a few questions for you in terms of how we can get some of that functionality that you were showing. But in terms of our Teams at the moment, what I was just going to show was that we've added in those apps into Teams as well. So you know, we've got all of the sanction requests, the call outs, and so on. Apps are inside Teams, so people can use them from the left-hand bar, can pin them to the left-hand bar, but also within specific teams. So this is the head of years team. We've got them there. So the head of year dashboard, which is a Power BI, is there. The tutor dashboard Power BI is there. We've actually also got the sanction request app in there as well. So, you know, we're trying to develop it so that actually the experience in Teams and the experience in SharePoint are pretty much one in the same. So whichever way you want to access it, you can access everything that you need, you know, to support you in your role. So yeah, in terms of what we've been doing, so Power BI, it was all the stuff from SIMS documentation that I mentioned, and the templates they provided that we started with, and then decided, okay, well that gives you a very basic dashboard, but we want to do some specific things that aren't included in there. So then trying to, you know, give ourselves training on how to do those things. The Power BI dashboard in a day training, for instance, was one of the things that I did. Similarly, the Power Apps in a day we went through as well. Power Automate, I mean, there is a MEC course and there is some stuff on Microsoft Learn, but you know, it's been one of those areas where I would say there is a bit of a lack of free training out there, and we've been basically making it up as we go along, and tinkering, as I said earlier, with Power Automate. SharePoint, I mean, I've been using SharePoint for probably about 15-16 years now, so I was already fairly familiar with that, but there is a MEC course on that as well, which is interesting. And as I mentioned, the Power Platform Fundamentals exam is something that I'm doing, and that one of our data managers will be doing as well. But really, it's just, as I've put at the bottom, an iterative development. We're constantly making changes to it. We're constantly seeking feedback, and trying to ensure that what we come up with is saving time for teachers, but saving time for SLT, allowing them to focus on their core business of teaching and learning, and ensuring students are making good progress. Some of the sort of where we're going in the future, Power Apps, really we want to try and eventually centralize some of those. So you could see we had quite a few apps. Ideally, I'd like to get to a point where we build almost like a master app that's got all the functionality of those smaller apps in it, so that instead of having to go from one app to another, there is one app that people use. And then just generally, increasing efficiency across the trust. So finding those problems that we've got in terms of communication and workflow, and designing solutions to them. Power BI, it's really about making sure we've got the range of data, the range of reports that we want. We're very much focused on audience specific, so certain dashboards for tutors, certain dashboards for heads of year, subject leaders, and so on. If I talk about the subject leader one for a moment, we want to make sure that it contains all the things that a subject leader would need to see. So at the moment, it contains things like which teachers in my department haven't taken their register this week, so that the head of department as line manager can have that conversation. It contains things like achievement points and behaviour points within that subject area, attendance in that subject area, assessment data. We want to eventually bring finance data into that as well, so that as a budget holder, I've got all of that in the same location. The assessment side of things is one that we're still developing. It's obviously the more difficult side of Power BI in terms of building things like Progress 8 measures and so on. So that's an area that's sort of ongoing, and of course everything changes in terms of how we're assessed. So that's an area. Trust level, again, we've got a trust level dashboard, but we really want to just make that better than it currently is, and make it work for trustees and school leaders. SharePoint, obviously, I mentioned we'd had some training at the girls' school on Monday, and I've got training at the boys' school later this week. So that whole process of relocating resources is happening now, where heads of subject have been asked to move the resources they want for each year group into the document libraries that Tony was showing, so that they're all in that one central location. Obviously, improving our communications. As I say, we've been using SharePoint for a long time for communications, but just making it more slimlined. An example of that is that one quick announcements bit that I showed you. We used to have two of those. One of them was one that any member of staff could post to, and the other one only SLT could post to. And quite rightly, in terms of the staff wellbeing committee, they felt that created a bit of a them and us situation. So we've got rid of the two, and we'll just now have one library that's used for quick announcements. The list automation, obviously, I've talked quite a lot about. Teams, flexible working, more collaboration between the schools. We want to look at perhaps setting up some teams with the associated SharePoint sites for things like, heads of subject across the schools. Obviously, we're also thinking that the trust will grow, so we need that to be possible for when more schools join the trust. They'll also have the same setup. Homework is a whole area that needs some decisions making on it in terms of giving parents access and so on, and we'll be working a bit with Tony and Cloud Design Box on that, on a bit of a trial for an app for parents to have access to the assignments. And then also, as I said, the app integration, so making sure all our apps that we're building are inside Teams and are both on the left-hand bar and along the top as tabs in particular teams. And sort of the last bit for me really is about that user adoption and change sort of piece. Obviously, as Tony was asking me about, we've had this massive increase in using Teams during the pandemic. But we're a school, we're a MAT that don't yet have some of the structures in place that would allow us to really sustain that level of usage. So, for instance, we don't have one-to-one devices in any of our schools at present, and therefore probably what has happened is likely to have happened is that Teams has gone back to being used by those departments who teach in areas where they've got computer rooms and laptop trolleys and all that sort of stuff, and then the other departments will have gone back to doing things the way they did before. So really, getting more devices is part of our long-term strategy, so that we can use that more inside the classroom, particularly based on teacher voice. There's a feeling that using forms for formative assessment in class is something that they want to do more of, but they need to have access to devices to do that. Homework, I mentioned, is a whole area that we need to discuss more and decide on our policy. And obviously there's the question about what happens from now on when there's pupil absence, when there's closures like snow days. Is it going to be a situation where we have remote learning happening at those times? I know that some schools do that. Some schools and some trusts have got students who, when they're ill, they can still get access to the lesson, they can still get access to the resources. So that whole area needs a bit more exploration. For the SharePoint, we'll add the SharePoint as a browser a tab. So as soon as you open a browser, it immediately shows on the screen. That's what we did with the old gateway, and that's what we'll do with the new one as well. And I think the main thing that we need to do there is just make sure that we've got the structures and the protocols in place for what should be communicated in what way. I've talked quite a lot about Power BI already, but it's well embedded with lots of different groups of users, particularly the heads of year. We need to do some more training, some more rollout with different groups. We need to make it easier to access, and we need to think a little bit about sort of more of a feedback loop. So at the moment it just presents information, so we want to find ways in which let's say you're looking at a student's profile on Power BI, and you want to add some detail to that. A way in which we can enable people to do that is something we want to look into. And all of this kind of is encompassed in a 5-year plan that we're putting together for spending, development and CPD. We're sort of at an early stage of that as well. But all of those things will feed into it. And that, I think, is me.
Thank you, Mark. That was really impressive. And I think that will have opened a lot of people's eyes to the possibilities. Obviously, those are endless with all those apps.
They are, yeah.
And I guess it's taken those first baby steps to get SharePoint and Teams ready first, and then add on these apps as you can over time. There's a lot of complexity there. And I think what we've seen in schools and trusts is start with the simple stuff first, get that working really well, and then move on to the next stuff. And it really helps if you've got someone like Mark developing that for you. So yeah, I'd really like to thank you for your time today, Mark. That's really useful, and we'll hopefully share this with lots of schools and trusts so they can also see what the benefits are. What I'll do is I'll just go through some of the questions that we've got in. So I'm just going to share my screen. So first, I'll just take you through some of the events that we've got coming up. So we've got some demonstrations coming up over the next few weeks. We've got Achieve More in Teams as a mat with Cloudbox. So again, we just go through some of our services in a bit more detail, looking at a mat setup. And we're also looking at further education. So colleges, sixth form colleges, how they are set up in teams and how, again, you can streamline those to save teachers time. And we're also looking at a long-term solution, so how you can centralize resources in SharePoint and Teams. And you can sign up for all of these events at the website /events. And I've just put on, while we look at the questions, these are the contact details for Cloud Design Box. So you've got our website, you can contact us through there. We've got lots of free resources on there as well. Our email address and our phone number. And if you do have a camera phone, you can point your camera at any of these QR codes, and that will take you to our Twitter channel, our newsletter sign up. So lots of useful guides and tips that we send out each month. Our YouTube channel, lots of free video guides and again tips and hints on our YouTube channel, and also our Facebook group, which is a private group for educators to share some of their best practices with other educators in using Microsoft Teams for education. So if anyone has any last minute questions, if you just post them now in the question and answer section. I've had a question come through from Darren Mark. How do you find the licensing for the Power Platform in an education tenant? Is this at extra cost to you to use these apps?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I was an expert on licensing by any means, but in order to to develop the Power BI dashboards, you need a Power BI Pro license first of all. And certainly the way it was a year ago, I think it's still the same, is that anyone that you then want to share it with, even though they're not going to be doing any developing themselves, also needs one of those licenses. And when you search for the cost of those licenses online, you'll probably sort of be aghast at how much they cost, because it looks very expensive. When you take education discounts into account, and you sort of shop around a bit, I mean, we actually got it down, I think it's somewhere like £1.20 or something like that, a license per year, something like that, per user. And so we got a very good deal, I think, on the licenses. We bought about 180 Power BI Pro licenses for use across the trust, and we're already using most of those, so we'll probably need more in due course. I know there are other sort of ways of licensing that I'm not completely familiar with in terms of licensing the app itself, and at some point I think the cost of buying the licenses individually and the cost of licensing individual apps will get very close to one another. At the moment, it doesn't make sense to us to go down that route because it's much more expensive, but eventually there will be a point, if we continue on the trajectory that we're on, where it probably will be more cost effective to get the app version of the license.
Great. So yeah, if you've got a licensed supplier, have a chat with them, see if you can get it cheaper. That's what I normally say with the Microsoft licensing. It is a bit of a black art sometimes. So I think that the Power Apps and the Power Automate licenses are normally included in the free education licenses. So it's the Power BI one is one that you have to purchase, and potentially some of the Power App and Power Automate licenses if you want to do the more complex stuff in there, some of the more advanced steps. Okay, so I don't think we've got any other questions that have come in, but if anyone thinks of any, then they can reach out to us on Twitter. We'll at Mark in them as well if you've got a question for Mark. But yeah, thanks a lot for your time today, Mark.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for that, and thank you for sharing everything that you've been working on at the MAT. Like I say, if anyone has any questions, if you want to get in touch, please feel free to do so. The contact details on the screen. Thank you, everyone.